Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out this afternoon. It's a pleasure to be back here in Iqaluit, joined by my kids, Xavier and Ella Grace, and our Liberal candidate for Nunavut, Megan Pizzolile. I try to get to our beautiful north as often as I can, and I'm glad to be able to meet with folks during this important election campaign. I was very lucky to get to Iqaluit twice this year already as Prime Minister, and back here a third time is outstanding. In March, I delivered an official apology for the horrible mistreatment of Inuit people during the tuberculosis epidemic. And in August, I announced nearly $300 million in funding for social and community housing projects across Nunavut. And on that same trip, our Liberal government, in partnership with the Kikitani Inuit Association and the government of Nunavut, announced the creation of the Tuvalutuk Marine Protected Area. On that note, today I want to talk a little bit about what a re-elected Liberal government will do to fight for a better environment. Unlike the Conservatives, Liberals believe that climate change is a real emergency that we must address now. It's not something we can leave to our kids and grandkids to figure out. And I know the people of Iqaluit don't need any convincing on that. Like so many of our friends in the north, you are truly on the front lines of the fight against climate change. After this event, I'm looking forward to sitting down to discuss with elders about how climate change is affecting northern communities. It's a conversation that we need to have right across the country, but especially here. Canada is warming at twice the global rate, and our north is heating up at 3 times the global average. That means unpredictable and dangerous ice conditions for harvesters. It means disrupted Arctic ecosystems. It means species extinction. Climate change is threatening our jobs, our health, and our future. But we can fight it. With ambition and courage, we can take real climate action. We'll work in close partnership with Indigenous peoples to make sure we get this right. And together, we will lift the burden off the shoulders of future generations. À travers le monde, les jeunes nous montrent la marche à suivre. Ils posent des questions difficiles à leurs dirigeants à propos des changements climatiques. Ils veulent savoir ce qu'on va faire pour protéger notre planète et notre avenir. Les conservateurs n'ont pas de réponse à offrir. Mais nous, oui. On a un plan pour réduire la pollution, créer des emplois et faire en sorte que le Canada soit un chef de file dans l'économie de demain. C'est un travail qu'on a déjà commencé en mettant un prix sur la pollution, en interdisant les plastiques à usage unique et en préservant nos terres et nos eaux et en protégeant nos océans. If Canadians choose to put their faith in our Liberal team once again on October 21st, we'll go even further to protect the environment. We'll conserve even more of our land and water. We'll help people retrofit their homes. We'll build an economic ecosystem that drives clean tech innovation. We'll ensure that all Indigenous communities are off diesel and instead powered by clean, affordable energy like hydro by the year 2030, and we'll hit net zero emissions by the year 2050. My friends, the Conservatives don't have a real plan to protect our beautiful environment. They see the North as a place to be exploited, not protected. But that's not right. The people of Nunavut deserve a government that will fight for them every single day. A government that will make the investments needed to tackle the rising cost of living. A government that will lower our emissions and preserve our planet for our kids and grandkids to enjoy. Unlike the Conservatives, Liberals won't give tax breaks to the wealthiest 1% or to big polluters. But we will do is make life more affordable for people who need to fight climate change. That's what we're offering in this election. A plan to invest in people, continue along the path of reconciliation, and move our country forward for everyone. Merci beaucoup d'être ici aujourd'hui.
David Aiken from Global News, Prime Minister, thank you for bringing the tour up here. I love visiting Nunavut. It's just beautiful. On climate change, last night you were pushed by your rivals from the left, shall we say, Mr. Singh and Ms. May, basically to say that you've got to be more urgent. Mr. Singh referred to, I think, as Mr. Delay, and Ms. May had some metaphors. What do you think about that idea? That I mean, it is right now. Climate change is threatening the ways of lives of Inuit and people in the north. Why not take it more urgent? Establish a war cabinet kind of thing for climate change.
We have moved forward with the strongest climate action that any government has taken in the history of this country. But we recognize we do need to do more. We've put a price on pollution right across the country over the objections of conservative premiers who don't want to do anything. We're banning single-use plastics. We're phasing out coal plants. We're protecting more and more of our vulnerable ecosystems that are essential in part of the fight against climate change. When we took office, just 1% of Canada's coasts and oceans were protected. We promised to get to 10% by 2020. Well, we've already hit 14%, thanks to some of the work we've done here in the Arctic, particularly in partnership with Inuit peoples. We know there is much more to do, and that's why we have a plan that's going to plant 2 billion trees. We have a plan that's going to cut corporate taxes in half for zero energy technology companies. We have a plan to give more money up front so that people can reinvest in their homes and make them more ecologically sound. These are the kinds of things and more that we're going to keep doing. And we're going to have to do them over the objections of conservative premiers like Doug Ford and Jason Kenney and others who don't believe we should be acting on climate change. The choice is very clear in this election. Either we continue with the most ambitious and doable plan that anyone has ever had in this country, or we wake up on October 22nd with a conservative government that has promised that its very first action would be to rip up the only serious climate change plan this country has ever had.
Et en français?
Nous allons continuer d'en faire plus. Depuis 4 ans, on a pris la lutte contre les changements climatiques extrêmement au sérieux. C'est pourquoi qu'on a fait énormément d'investissements et pris énormément d'actions pour lutter contre les changements climatiques, y compris de mettre un prix sur la pollution à travers le pays, malgré les objections de politiciens conservateurs qui ne veulent pas lutter contre les changements climatiques. Tout le monde doit faire leur part et c'est exactement ce que nous allons s'assurer, tout en s'assurant aussi que c'est abordable pour les Canadiens, pour les familles. Mais le choix est clair. Le lendemain de l'élection, si on a un gouvernement conservateur, Andrew Scheer a promis d'éliminer carrément le seul vrai plan pour lutter contre les changements climatiques qu'on a eu dans l'histoire du pays, ou bien on peut continuer à en faire plus avec notre Parti libéral. C'est exactement ce que je sais que les Canadiens veulent faire.
And you mentioned a couple of other premiers. Let's talk about Premier McLeod next door, Northwest Territories, who I think aligned himself with that resistance at one point in time. And his chief complaint, and the complaint of some Northerners, is that those of us in the South try to just want to have this as a big park, and that prevents people in the North from developing the resources here and continue their own prosperity. It's sort of the chief complaint of Premier McLeod, that you've sort of the balance has gone too much the other way, and there would be like to be more resource development here in the North.
That is very much why we put in place, in partnership with northern communities, with Indigenous groups, and with the northern premiers, an Arctic policy framework that sets out the priorities as seen by Northerners, that yes, include significant actions to protect our environment and fight climate change, but also significant investments in infrastructure so that we can continue to develop the opportunities, good jobs, and a good future here in this part of the country without putting at risk future generations. We know that the only way to move forward is in partnership and respect with local peoples, and that is why we are making infrastructure investments, why we are developing economic opportunities. But we will do it because we listen to Indigenous peoples and their leadership in a way that sustains this gorgeous land for future generations as well.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau. Je voudrais revenir sur le débat. Hier, pendant les échanges, l'enjeu de la loi sur la laïcité a provoqué, en fait, a tracé des lignes de démarcation claires entre les chefs. Est-ce que vous avez l'impression que ça va devenir un enjeu déterminant pour les gens du Québec particulièrement?
Je pense pas. Je pense que les Québécois connaissent très bien ma position depuis longtemps sur cet enjeu, que je suis pas d'accord avec cette loi, mais que je comprends que des Québécois sont en train de défendre leurs droits en cours actuellement et que je n'interviendrai pas. Mais que je garde la porte ouverte à une intervention possible plus tard parce que je trouve qu'un gouvernement fédéral doit toujours être là pour défendre les droits fondamentaux, que ce soit des droits des minorités religieuses, que ce soit des droits linguistiques francophones à travers le pays ou les droits des femmes ou des communautés LGBT. Ce n'est pas une question de champ de compétences, c'est une question de respect de droits fondamentaux. J'ai toujours été très clair en anglais et français sur cet enjeu-là et je continuerai de l'être.
Hier, en anglais, s'il vous plaît.
Okay. I have always been very clear, both in French and in English, about my disagreement with Bill 21, which I feel doesn't protect religious minorities. But I've also recognized that our charter is working the way it is supposed to. Canadians, Quebecers, have taken their government to court because they feel that law limits their fundamental freedoms. I have committed to not engage at this particular time in this particular process, but I have not ruled out a federal government weighing in at a later date on this issue because a federal government cannot ever rule out the need to stand up for fundamental freedoms, whether it is linguistic rights, whether it is diversity rights, LGBT rights, women's rights, or the rights of religious minorities.
Hier, justement, vous avez utilisé votre position, c'est-à-dire de garder la porte ouverte pour vous distinguer de vos adversaires. Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas un risque d'envoyer des électeurs québécois indécis chez vos adversaires, notamment le Bloc québécois?
Je pense que les Québécois savent très bien que je vais toujours défendre les droits fondamentaux. C'est ce que j'ai fait quand il est venu le temps de défendre les francophones en Ontario contre les coupures des conservateurs de Doug Ford. C'est ce que j'ai fait tout au long de ma carrière, de défendre les minorités. Les Québécois que je représente depuis 10 ans dans Papineau et même les gens à travers la province et le pays savent très bien que je ferai toujours ça. Je vais toujours défendre les droits fondamentaux.
Prime Minister, I wanted to ask you about free speech under your government. You said that the government is committed to defending fundamental rights. And now that the election is on, we're living under a new section of the Canada Elections Act, Section 91. And under that law, people can go to prison for up to 5 years for publishing, tweeting false statements about a political leader's education, place of birth. If I were to tweet, for example, Justin Trudeau never went to school, Justin Trudeau is an American citizen, I could go to prison for that. That law is being challenged in court. Do you intend to defend it, and do you feel that it overreaches into Canadians' free speech rights?
We recognize that one of the cornerstones of democracy is free speech and the ability of people to debate openly and to make decisions about who they are going to vote for and who they're going to elect to manage the direction of their country. And that important choice that citizens must make at election time needs to be informed, needs to be not twisted or torqued in deliberate ways by falsehoods. And it's a very delicate balance to walk between upholding our democracy by ensuring that people are not misleading citizens, while at the same time making sure that citizens have access to a full range of views and perspectives. We're in a world right now where we've seen the impact of the kinds of polarization, the kinds of politics, of misinformation, of fear and division, whether we look at what's happening in the UK or what's happening in the United States. There are reasons to acquire and to develop new tools to make sure that Canadians and people in democracies can be informed as they want to be able to make the right decisions for their future in a way that respects free speech. We have made an approach, we have developed an approach that is going to be protecting Canadians from misinformation. We recognize that this is a careful line to walk, and we will continue to walk it with Canadians.
So talking about that balance, I know your government is also looking at bringing back Section 13 which was cancelled by the Harper government. It was widely criticized as being overly broad and a crude tool that repressed free speech. So will you bring that law back? Will you change it from how it used to be? How far do you plan to go in restricting expression if you're reelected?
We have been consulting with experts, with academics, with various community groups, and with people right across the country on all sides of the political spectrum. And we have recognized that the dissemination of hatred and violence on the internet is not an area that we have sufficient laws to cover. You can get away with saying things on the internet that you could never get away in a public square. And we need to make sure that laws are there to protect people in a virtual space as much as they would in a real life space. But getting that balance right, again, is something that our friends and like-minded countries around the world are struggling with, as are we. We were pleased to be part of the Christchurch Declaration on fighting terrorism on the internet. But we recognize there is much more to do, and we will be looking at ways to both protect the fundamental importance of free speech while at the same time ensuring that everyone is safe in our democracy.
Last night, Mr. Scheer led off the debate by calling you a phony, a fraud, and a fake feminist. Do you think that the tone of the rhetoric has changed in this campaign versus 2015? And if so, why do you think that has changed?
I was actually happy that the debate last night talked so much about the environment. We ended up talking about climate change through all the different themes of the debate, and it really is the challenging issue of our time that Canadians are going to be called to make a choice on. And the choice is very clear of whether or not they wake up on the 22nd with a government that, as Andrew Scheer has said, has pledged that the very first thing he'll do is rip up the only real climate change plan that any Canadian government has ever had. This is something that we know is not what Canadians want to do. And in Mr. Scheer's approaches last night, I think he made it very clear that he thinks this election is about me. This election isn't about me. This election is about Canadians, and an essential choice they have to make as to whether we continue to move forward and be even more ambitious in the hard work we've done over the past 4 years, or we go back to a Harper vision of what this country was for 10 years. J'ai été content de voir que pendant ce débat hier soir, dans toutes les différentes sections, on a parlé de changement climatique. Parce que la lutte contre les changements climatiques est le grand enjeu de notre ère. Les jeunes, les peuples autochtones, les Canadiens d'un bout à l'autre du pays, des gens à travers le monde nous en appellent à en faire plus. Et le choix est clair pour les Canadiens. Malgré le fait que M. Scheer pense que cette élection, c'est à propos de moi, cette élection, c'est pour les Canadiens de décider si on va continuer d'avancer et lutter contre les changements climatiques ou est-ce qu'on va accepter un gouvernement conservateur qui va éliminer dès sa première journée le plan le plus sérieux qu'on ait jamais eu pour lutter contre les changements climatiques.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau, Hannah Thibodeau, CBC News. We're hearing on the ground here that people were very offended by the blackface, brownface photographs of you, and they're reconsidering voting for you because of that. How does that make you feel?
I took responsibility for terrible mistakes I made in the past that hurt people, and I have endeavored, as I have throughout my entire career, to fight for an end to racism, to fight against discrimination, and I recognize that as a government and as an individual, we have much more to do, and we will.
Is there anything you can say right now that would convince them otherwise?
I think the record that we've put forward on reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, on fighting discrimination and anti-Black racism, being the first government in Canada to recognize the decade of UN Decade of African Descent, to call out anti-Black racism as it still exists in Canada, to move forward to fight systemic discrimination and unconscious bias. to actually increase the funding for these programs that specifically empower grassroots organizations and communities to lead the way in shifting mindsets. I recognize there is much more to do, and I have pledged myself to do much more over the coming years.
Mr. Trudeau, Lee Bethune from the Canadian Press. Last night on stage, you said that the allegations the Globe and Mail had published about the SNC-Lavalin affair were false. Yet, after Mario Dionne's report came out, you said you take responsibility. So how do you take responsibility for something that you say didn't happen? What do you say is false?
I accepted Mr. Dionne's report, but I also disagreed with his conclusions. I don't think it is, I think it is important and indeed the job of a Prime Minister to stand up for people's jobs, to defend Canadians, to defend the public interest. I don't think any Canadian Prime Minister can ever set aside the need to stand up for the public interest, and that's exactly what I did.
So what are you saying is false with the allegations?
I was actually saying that Mr. Scheer was mischaracterizing the situation.
Mr. Trudeau, Christiane Meyer, German television. You might be criticized here a lot. In Germany, many people look in awe at the carbon tax, which we do not have. So my question is, how does that correspond with digging up more and more oil sands, A, and B, what can you teach Angela Merkel?
First of all, I don't know that I have a lot to teach Angela Merkel at all. I have indeed learned a tremendous amount from her on geopolitics over the past years, and I consider her to be a friend and an ally on many, many issues, including the fight against climate change. Here in Canada, we know that putting a price on pollution is one of the best ways to move forward to both reduce our emissions and ensure that Canadians can afford the transition towards clean energy, because as we put a price on pollution, we are returning more money to 8 out of 10 Canadian families through our tax system than they will be paying with the new price on pollution. So making sure we are fighting climate change and keeping it affordable for people is the solution we've put forward in Canada that I know a lot of countries around the world are looking at with interest. And indeed, we do know we need to transition to a cleaner economy, but we also know that that transition will not happen overnight, that there is still a need for fossil fuels in Canada and around the world. And when faced with a choice of accepting a deep discount from the United States on the fact that we can only export oil, or 99% of our oil, to the United States versus reaching new markets and getting closer to global prices for it, or whether it's facing the fact that over the past few years, because of a lack of pipeline capacity, oil by rail has increased astronomically, which is both more polluting and more dangerous for communities. We know that investing in a pipeline and ensuring that all the profits, the hundreds of millions of dollars of profits, get invested in a clean energy transition and a fight against climate change is an essential part of the path forward. But part of the plan on the twinning the Trans Mountain pipeline was ensuring that Alberta put an absolute cap on their oil sands emissions, which means the TMX project fits within our ambitious plan to actually reach and surpass our 2030 climate change targets.
Quickly, how far up would the price have to go to make a difference?
We have committed to continue to increase the price on pollution up until 2022. And then in 2023, we get to have an election again to talk about what the next steps are on the price of pollution. We've made very clear what our plan is to increase the price on pollution, and I know there are a number of economists out there who talk about need for a much higher price on pollution, but that is absent any other actions. And what we've actually done is a tremendous range of other actions on fighting climate change. That means that the plan that we've laid out to increase the emission, the price on pollution until 2022 is responsible and reasonable and ambitious. Et, nous nous sommes engagés d'augmenter ce prix sur la pollution tous les ans jusqu'en 2022. Et en 2023, on aura la chance d'avoir des élections fédérales qui vont nous permettre de discuter des prochaines étapes et les Canadiens vont pouvoir prendre une décision à ce niveau-là. Notre plan est ambitieux, il est faisable et c'est exactement ce que M. Scheer va éliminer si il devient premier ministre. Et c'est ça le choix auquel les gens font face. Est-ce qu'on va continuer avec un plan ambitieux et réalisable ou est-ce qu'on va retourner à l'ère Harper où le gouvernement fédéral ne faisait rien pour lutter contre les changements climatiques?
Jackie, CBC North. Climate change is affecting us the most here in the Arctic. How will the Liberal government address mitigation measures we need here in the Arctic, such as retrofitting green housing initiatives here in the Arctic, and how will you get the North off of diesel?
We recognize that the impacts of climate change are felt much greater here in the North by Northerners when they have such a smaller contribution to Canada's overall footprint than just about any other part of the country. We recognize that this is an extra burden on top of communities that already face incredibly high costs of living, which is why we have been so committed to investing in the North, to investing in infrastructure, to investing in housing, to investing in new fiber optic cables for better broadband, to investing in food security and in Nutrition North. We recognize there is more to do, and I'm looking forward to sitting down with elders this afternoon to talk about their experiences around climate change and what more we can all do together. But we made a very different choice than conservative governments of the past in our desire to invest in communities as opposed to cuts and balancing the budget at all costs. And that, once again, is the choice that Canadians are facing in this upcoming election, a choice that Northerners are facing between a Liberal candidate, a Liberal MP, and Megan Pizzolile, who will be part of the fight to invest more and help communities both mitigate against climate change and grow opportunities for future generations, or a conservative approach that failed the North by not fighting climate change, that failed the North by not investing in the infrastructure the people of the North so deeply need.
Hi, I'm a transgender Nancy News. You just mentioned Nutrition North. In your 2015 platform, you said that you would make Nutrition North more transparent and accountable. That doesn't really seem to be the case. Nunavumia are still fighting high prices, fighting food insecurity. What promises are you making to Nunavumia to fight food insecurity?
Well, the first thing is we did significantly improve Nutrition North by bringing in more transparency and more accountability. But we continue to recognize that there is more to do. Northerners still face unacceptably high prices for basic necessities, and we will do more. We recognize the cost of living. It is a real challenge for Northerners, and we will be there to continue to work with them to bring down the costs of everyday lives. One of the commitments in our platform, on top of further investments in Nutrition North, is to increase the Northern travel allowance so that people can keep more of their hard-earned money, even if they need to go south for various things. This is something that we know because we heard from Northerners was important. And we're going to continue to work to make sure that food security and affordable, nutritious food for our kids continues to be available and a priority.
Hi there, I'm Raj with Nunavut News. I just wanted to ask, how many homes will you be committed to building in Nunavut over the next 4 years?
We have put forward a national housing strategy that is focused on building affordable infrastructure right across the country, but it's not obviously a cookie cutter model that will be the same everywhere. And the partnership we've established with both the ITK and the government of Nunavut to move forward in responsible ways that meet the needs of communities on the ground that are particular here in Northern Canada is ambitious and significant. We have made I was up here just a few months ago to announce a significant housing investment, but we know there is much more to do, and that again is the choice facing Northerners in this election. Do we keep moving forward with a government that is committed to invest in the North? Or do we go back to the Harper years, where a Conservative Prime Minister came up to visit every now and then, but did not invest in the needs of the communities?
Ian Oster from Leader Times. We're well into an election campaign where you and Mr. Scheer are presenting very differing ideas on a number of things, but particularly on dealing with climate change. Yet we've seen very little movement for either of you. What's going on? Is the country divided on this issue? Is it too crowded? Why is at this point nothing changed?
We recognize in conversations with Canadians right across the country in the numbers of young people who've stepped up to protest in the streets and demand climate action, that there is a consensus right across the country that fighting climate change is necessary, not just for future generations on our planet, but for the economy of tomorrow, for the jobs our kids and grandkids are going to have. At the same time, right across the country, as you pointed out, Conservative premiers that have promised to do nothing on fighting climate change have gotten elected, from the Rockies to the Bay of Fundy. They don't think we should be fighting climate change, and they did get elected. So in this election, Canadians are facing a choice of doubling down on Conservative leadership across the country that doesn't think we should be acting on climate change, that has promised to rip up the only serious plan to fight climate change that Canada has ever had, or elect a government that's going to stand strong against premiers like Doug Ford and Jason Kenney, who not only want to cut services for people, want to do nothing on climate change, and don't understand that you can't have a plan for the future of the economy if you don't have a plan to protect the environment. And I am confident from the conversations I've had with Canadians that nobody wants to wake up on the 22nd of October with no plan for the future of our kids. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Hello again, Peter Van Dusen watching along with you. The Liberal leader Justin Trudeau in Iqaluit, talking about the environment and climate change and taking questions, as you